attacks, insults, or threats. We're asking everyone to speak and act professionally, and we're going to try to allow for a balance of speaking time. I know there's lots of people who likely have questions and comments. We want to hear them all, but we want to make sure we have enough time to hear from everybody as well. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Director Kelly Suswin to start us off this morning with some opening remarks.
Thanks, Mark, and welcome everybody. I want to first and foremost thank you for spending some time with us this morning. We know how valuable your time is. We also know how important these fisheries are to everybody. So we're going to do a kind of a blast through on a presentation here, trying to meet all audiences. So we'll do a little bit of history of what North of Falcon is, our forecast, our modeling, etc. Let you know what we've found out at PFMC. My main message for folks is to be optimistic but realistic. Overall, Puget Sound, things are a little better for both Chinook and Coho, but than they have been recently, but we're still depressed on the long term. And we still have those pinch points that we have to make sure we protect. And so we're all about eking out whatever fisheries we can, but it's not going to be drastically different than what you've seen in the past few years, just driven by the run size. I hate always being the Debbie Downer, but every year I get people disappointed we didn't have a big break in fisheries. And we're not seeing anything this year that's going to lead to that. That said, there are certainly some bright spots, and we'll take advantage of them wherever we can. So again, thanks to the team. The team's working hard to put these things together for you, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Kelly. So again, here's an agenda for this morning's meeting. We'll probably be together for about an hour here as we go through the list of topics on the screen here. And then we will do our breakout meetings. Today we have a Puget Sound recreational breakout, a Puget Sound commercial breakout, and then a coastal fisheries breakout. There was a Columbia River meeting, North of Falcon meeting yesterday, and we'll go through the remaining meetings at the end of this agenda this morning. So just for those folks who are new to the process or just now learning, in North of Falcon, what we're doing now is the annual cooperative process to set salmon seasons in Washington waters. The name North of Falcon comes from Oregon's Cape Falcon. Essentially, that's the southern most boundary of our Washington management area. This North of Falcon process is part of a much larger salmon season setting process that involves state and tribal governments, our federal regulators, other US states, as well as Canada as well. So this graphic, this timeline is a representative of the process that we go through every year to set salmon seasons. This actually is pretty close to one that we have up on our website that also involves links and much broader information. We're around the center of this timeline now in that March area, where we're holding public meetings and receiving comment and feedback about potential fishing seasons. This will continue into later in the month as we start to narrow down what those options are as we meet with our tribal co-managers and federal regulators until we culminate with the fishing package in mid-April at the next Pacific Fishery Management Council meeting. In May and June, this is all part of our rulemaking for the salmon seasons as well. We'll hear public comments about our proposed salmon seasons, and in June, the director will adopt these seasons, adopt the regulations. Co-management, you'll often hear that term as we go through this. Co-management is an ongoing process. It doesn't just happen with North of Falcon. It's something that we do with our tribal co-managers year round. So what guides us each year as we're setting salmon seasons? There's a lot of things that guide us, including Endangered Species Act constraints, Fish and Wildlife Commission policies, Pacific Salmon Treaty obligations, our co-management. I just spoke to co-management. We share this data, develop forecasts, and develop fisheries packages together through this process. And then also we do extensive monitoring and evaluation of all these fisheries statewide and coastwide to be able to provide us the information we need each year to set salmon seasons. So just another kind of timeline through the process. Again, where the forecasts happen each year in late January and February. As part of those forecasts and modeling, we determine if there's available harvest and to what levels. When we know that, we start to shape and propose fisheries around those available harvest levels. We use our predictive models to determine which stocks we need to pay the most attention to for conservation and constraints. We negotiate these salmon seasons with tribes and other states for fair sharing on allocation and impacts. And then finally, at the end of, as I said, in mid-April, we'll come out with a final agreed to state and tribal fishing package. And all those proposed and agreed to fisheries are contained in a document called the List of Agreed Fisheries. So just for those who weren't at our forecast meeting or haven't paid attention up to this point, just to do a quick recap of the forecasts for 2022. For Puget Sound Chinook, the natural stocks are down 36%, but the hatchery stocks are up 6% from a recent 10-year average. For coastal Chinook, the natural stocks are up 8%, hatchery stocks up about 10%. Columbia River, there are improved returns for spring and similar to last year for summer runs. The lower river hatchery stocks are similar to last year, down about 11% from the recent 10-year average. For Puget Sound Coho, the natural stocks are up by about 30%, and the hatchery stocks are actually up considerably, about 61% from the 10-year average. Bright spot is coastal Coho. The natural stocks are up around 45% overall, and the hatchery stocks are up around 63% overall from the 10-year. And for Columbia River Coho, there are, again, similar to last year, although a little less than last year, very good returns of Coho forecasted for the Columbia River. So each year we have management objectives. Often they're contained in terms of a exploitation rate or an escapement goal. And maybe this is a good time to mention, we have a lot of information on our website. Sometimes we use terms like escapement or ER or exploitation rate. We have a glossary of terms and kind of a cheat sheet on our website that folks can return to if they're uncertain about what we're speaking to here. So what you see on this slide is a representation of ocean and Columbia River management objectives for the key stocks that we manage for. The big one that's been shaping our ocean fisheries package through PFMC is that Columbia River Toolies. Our objective this year is that 38%. Lower Columbia Natural Coho, 23%. And you can see the escapement goals for the coastal Coho stocks there. And the other one that we pay attention to in Puget Sound is that interior Fraser Thompson Coho, which is capped at a 10% Southern US exploitation rate. For Puget Sound, these are our Chinook management objectives for Puget Sound. You'll see there's a bolded one there for the Snohomish River. That summer run stock is coming, the prediction coming in is that it's below the lower bound threshold. And our management objectives require that co-managers discuss what that management goal is for this year, and we have yet to have those discussions. So we know the goal has to be below 8.3%, but we don't have a definitive goal for that stock yet. The other one's just highlighting there, and Derek from our FRAM modeling team will speak to it later. You'll look at Nooksack Springs, Nisqually, and Skokomish are other stocks that we're paying attention to through the preseason modeling. For Puget Sound, our coho management objectives, there's 5 wild management units that guide our coho management. And you'll see the forecasts and fishery management status for this year and the exploitation rate ceilings for all those stocks. You'll notice that several of those have stars by them. Those are stocks that have either been overfished and are working towards rebuilding in the recent years. We did see a pretty decent return to the Snohomish last year, which gives us some optimism, but that is still in rebuilding status and has a preseason forecast that's below escapement. Hood Canal is one that we've been paying attention to, but recently was designated as overfished. So the co-managers will be working with our federal regulators to work on a rebuilding plan for Hood Canal wild coho in the near future. So we talked about the Pacific Fishery Management Council meeting that happened last week. As part of those meetings, that meeting is when we set ocean alternatives for this year for fisheries occurring along the West Coast. So what you see in front of you here are the proposed non-treaty ocean quotas for both Chinook and Coho this year. And you can see them as compared to what was offered last year as part of the ocean fishing package. I think there's some optimism for coastal fisheries for this year. So the other thing I would say is this is an important piece of the puzzle, and it helps set sideboards for what we can start looking at for fisheries packages within Puget Sound and the Columbia River. This is an important first step in the process that sets these limits so we can start planning on the inside. And I believe with that, I'm going to hand it over to Derek Dapp from our FRAM modeling unit, who's going to go through some of the preliminary modeling results coming out of the Pacific Fishery Management Council meeting and what those mean for fishery planning. Derek?
Thank you for that, Mark. And so maybe as we're going to go through these results, first thing we should do is just describe what's in these model runs currently. At the stage of the process that we're at, these model runs represent models updated with 2022 abundances for all stocks in the model, with two exceptions. We haven't received Canadian forecasts just yet, as well as we haven't received Oregon forecasts. Those two stocks will be updated at a later date in the modeling. As far as fisheries go, these still contain 2021 Puget Sound fisheries, but these model runs have now been updated to include 2022 fishery inputs for all areas outside of Puget Sound, with the exception once more of two Canadian fisheries, the west coast of Vancouver Island troll and sport, as well as northern British Columbia troll and sport. Those two will be updated a little bit later in the process as well. So Mark described the ocean options, and right here in front of us, we've got kind of the preliminary results from some of the Chinook and Coho modeling here. As we're looking at the initial results, we are looking at in this table the high ocean option on the far right. And starting maybe first with Chinook, we do think as far as ocean fisheries go for this year, the primary constraining stock for Chinook will be the lower Columbia natural toolies. And they have a management objective of 38% exploitation rate. You can see in the high ocean option, the model's currently projecting an exploitation rate of 40.3%. We have, as far as some of the Coho stocks, we have their current model outputs over there on the right, as well as their objectives to the left. Maybe the one that I would call our attention to here is the interior Fraser Coho. And once again, many of these stocks are forecast to be a little bit up from last year and the recent year averages. For interior Fraser Coho, we are coming pretty close to that 10% SUSER, and we're going to want to be paying attention to that as we start to put 2022 Puget Sound fisheries into the modeling. So looking at more Chinook modeling, these are kind of our Puget Sound stocks that we're managing to, and it's the same type of deal. We're looking in the middle column at the management objective for this coming year, as well as on the far right column, we're looking at that high ocean option modeling run. And we can see kind of the stocks that are highlighted are some of the ones that we're going to want to be paying attention to as we continue to go through modeling exercises. Maybe starting with Nooksack Springs at the very top, we see we've got a 10.9% SUS management objective there, and currently the modeling runs are coming out at 11.3%. in the high ocean option. We don't think that Nooksack's going to be one of our primary constrainers this year, but we are going to be paying attention to it because it is currently exceeding in that high ocean option. Maybe talking about two of the other stocks that we're paying attention to this year, Nisqually and Skokomish. We can see that both of those stocks are currently exceeding their management objective in the high ocean option run. So those are two that we'll be looking out for. However, the two that we'll be exploring in a little bit more depth later, and two of the ones that we think are going to be our primary constrainers this year are, first of all, Stillaguamish, where we have a 9% unmarked SUS management objective and a 14% marked SUS management objective. Stillaguamish has been a primary constrainer to our fisheries in recent years, and we expect that in this year it will continue to be so. For Snohomish, Mark had kind of highlighted that we're below the lower bound threshold for that stock, and it puts us in the category where we would discuss the allowable impacts for that stock. Currently in the modeling, we're coming out at 7.3% SUS, but we can kind of explore that stock a little bit more later in some of the breakout sessions. Moving on to the Coho modeling, we have kind of the range of ocean options here from high to mid to low in the far right columns. And once again, those objectives you can see in the ER ceiling column. For here, kind of the first stock that I would call our attention to is Snohomish. Snohomish is, as Mark mentioned, in a rebuilding status, and our escapement goal there is 55,000 fish. It's looking like in all of our ocean option runs, we're below that 55,000 mark. So as we're shaping fisheries this year, that's one that we're primarily going to be paying attention to. However, there's also maybe a few other things that I might point out on for Coho, which is looking particularly at Hood Canal, JDF, and Lower Fraser. On all of those stocks, we're getting pretty close to those management objectives. And as we're kind of considering our inputs that we're going to be using for 2022 modeling, we're just going to want to pay attention to how those stocks look as we continue to shape fisheries. So considerations for 2022, the 2022 salmon season. Just to reiterate some of these, the forecasts for both Puget Sound Chinook and Coho stocks have improved relative to recent years. The Chinook stocks continue to be depressed relative to their status at listing, and they're designated as in crisis by the State of the Salmon Report for 2020. Two Chinook stocks, once again, that we are paying a lot of attention to and that we might speak to more in some of the breakout rooms are Stillaguamish and Snohomish. We have low expected returns for both of those stocks, and we'll be paying attention to those as we craft our fisheries. As far as Coho goes, we're going to be paying attention to natural Coho in South Sound, Hood Canal, and JDF. And when the first modeling results come out, we're going to be looking at how our 2022 fisheries affect those. A bright spot here is Queets, where we see maybe a little bit of a stronger return than we've seen in recent years. And then perhaps for Snohomish, where we saw a little bit stronger return than expected last year. And kind of paying attention to both those stocks and their rebuilding status. Chum stocks are forecast to be returning similar to they were in 2021 for both South Sound and Hood Canal. And of course, we have continued concerns for SRKW, so that's another consideration that we'll be thinking about as we shape our fisheries.
So thank you, Derek. Appreciate that. Quickly, we're going to just run through upcoming meetings that we have, and then before we head to breakouts, we'll take some of your questions heading into those breakouts. So right in front of us, starting on the 21st, well, I guess after today, the state and tribes get together tomorrow and Friday to have our first preliminary discussions around fishing seasons. Starting next week, we have a public hearing on the ocean salmon management options, a Grays Harbor fishery discussion on the 21st, and then a North Coast Straits regional fisheries discussion on the 23rd, followed by a Willapa Bay discussion on the 24th. Another Puget Sound recreational discussion on the 28th. Our second North of Falcon meeting will be on the 30th, I believe, is our public meeting. Somebody check me on that. We have tribal meetings on either side of that. followed by further Columbia River and ocean fisheries discussions, Willapa Bay and Grays Harbor fishery discussions, and then wrapping up from the 7th through the 13th of April is the final Pacific Fishery Management Council meetings. So with that, there's a lot of staff on the line here to take your questions. And then obviously, as I said, we're going to get into kind of our gear breakouts for Puget Sound recreational fisheries and Puget Sound commercial fisheries, as well as a coastal breakout. So with that, if you have a broad question here that one of us can answer, please go ahead and raise your hand and Leah will unmute you to ask.
Looks like our first question is from Zachary. Zachary, I have unmuted you.
Thank you. So my question is basically, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Given that the West Coast Vancouver Island in particular is an extremely damaging fishery for a lot of our stocks, how much can we really model at this point, given that, because I know that that's one of the most impacting stocks, specifically in the Stillaguamish fish, like how much can we even do about projecting impacts if that is still totally a question?
Go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, so if I could on that one, that's an interesting question, Zach. And as far as WCVI goes, you are correct that it is one of the fisheries along the West Coast that has the highest impacts on many of our Puget Sound stocks. For WCVI, we do kind of in the modeling, we use what's called a scalar, and I won't get too much into what that is, but it's meant to represent kind of an effort from last year. So it's presuming kind of the same effort from last year. And as we provide new abundances to the model, it's acting on those abundances to kind of estimate the catch. So we are trying to take into account kind of the effort that they had last year and apply that to the new abundances that we've got. It's definitely not a perfect metric, and we definitely will see changes to some of those exploitation rates as we go through the modeling process. But we do try to take into account the importance of that fishery and the new abundances that we've got in the model relative to what the fishery could be.
Thank you.
And it looks like our next question is from Shannon. Shannon, I have unmuted you.
Yeah, good morning. So I've got a couple questions here. First off, what ocean option did you use last year? 1, 2, or 3 on the coast? And then the other thing that was brought up earlier was the West Coast Vancouver Island fishery. A few years ago, I checked into it, and Greenpeace said that a million licenses are sold on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and I believe that fishery starts the middle of this month. So, do we really know how many fish are intercepted? My understanding, most of them are headed for the Columbia River, but many of our northern stocks are also impacted in that fishery. So let's start with question 1. Thanks.
If I could, Mark, maybe I'll start with this one as well, and you could potentially add to it. So speaking specifically to Chinook here, Shannon, I know that West Coast Vancouver Island does impact our Columbia stocks, but we really get a wide range of stocks that fishery is impacting. It affects Puget Sound is one of the primary hit stocks, as well as Fraser and those stocks off the West Coast of Vancouver Island. It's really quite a mixed bag of stocks that's being encountered in that fishery.
So Shannon, Derek took question 2 first. I think I'm going to let Kyle Addix answer your first question about ocean levels from last year.
Thanks, Mark. Last year, the third option, as I think Mark mentioned in that slide, was actually no fishing in the ocean. So for Chinook, the final package was a quota level that was between 1 and 2. It was 58,000. For Coho, we actually wound up at a number that was between the no fishing option and option 2. It was 75,000.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Kyle. Appreciate that. Just wanted to know what you ended up how you ended up managing it. Did you achieve your objectives, do you think?
Don't know on all the exploitation rates till it takes us more than a year to get all of the data compiled and the models run. So we don't know yet relative to all of the exploitation rates. We stayed within all of the quota levels. We had to close many of the fisheries early to stay within the Coho quota levels last year. So yes, we stayed within our in-season quota objectives. We have to put all the fisheries together and look at all the exploitation rates across all the fisheries before we can answer did we meet all of our objectives across all of the stocks and all of the fisheries.
Yeah, okay. So one last comment on that West Coast Vancouver Island. You know, the near shore, pretty much the near shore is off limits in the middle of the island. They've got that section closed because that's where the Thai salmon run down, and then so these charter outfits they run out on the edge, and that's where that's where most of our fish are caught, right on the edge there. So where the trench drops off. So my understanding is there's one heck of a lot of fish taken out there. So I'll just leave it at that. Bye.
Thank you, Shannon. And our next hand is Alex. Alex, I have unmuted you.
Thank you, Shannon. Good morning, everybody. I appreciate you guys' time and giving us this information here today. I'll start just to follow up on some of this Vancouver or BC stuff. According to your guys' 10-year management plan, the data you had in there that the Stilly fall mortality rate is 55.6% in BC waters, tidal waters, I believe. So when you guys are working with I believe the Pacific Salmon Commission, are we actually petitioning to them on the rate at which the Stilly fall mortalities are occurring, as well as with the exploitation rate for marked and non-marked is over 20%. So when we are at the Pacific Salmon Commission meetings, is that being highlighted to them? And I have a follow-up to that once you have an answer.
So thanks, Alex. I'll attempt to answer that, and I would ask any others who are involved in the council process to weigh in. There's part of the Pacific Salmon Commission. There's the Chinook Technical Committee. They do meet quite often and do evaluations of impacts of Chinook stocks. We did just start, I believe it started in 2019. There's a new 10-year annex as part of the treaty. And as part of that negotiation, there were reduced fisheries, especially tied to abundance, that were put in place for those northern fisheries that impact these stocks. I think we've made our case pretty clear about that. We gained those fisheries reductions in order to put more fish, like those Stillaguamish fish, in Washington waters to get back to the gravel. So yes, we will continue to push on that. Obviously, it's our tribal co-managers are part of that, and they're involved in that process and have the same concerns we do. Derek, I saw you turn your camera off. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to what I said.
I think that was an excellent summary, Mark. I'm just going to put if Alex is interested, I'm just going to put a link to the most recent Pacific Salmon Treaty from 2019 in the chat so that he can explore that further if he'd like.
Okay, now with that considered, so when we asked this question on the last meeting, I believe the answer was that DFO has their own salmon runs that they are trying to focus on, so that they're not necessarily spending any focus on the ones that are most impactful for us, i.e. the Stillies. So my question would be how is the Stilly fish not a focus to them when we can literally go 10 feet over the border and we're allowed to catch Stillaguamish fish, wild, marked or unmarked, at this time, and have been for the past I believe, into February. So I'm just concerned on why we're not having more pressure on DFO, and why we're not having more pressure on the Pacific Salmon Commission to highlight the fact that they are having a 2 fish limit, marked or non-marked, currently on a dangerously low ESA stock fish that is actually mandated our season setting process at this point, and to the effects of 55.6 mortality rate, and to the effects with over 20% of exploitation rate for both the marked and non-marked. So I'm just curious if we're just saying, hey, they deal with their fish river stocks, we deal with ours. But if we're part of a commission together, then it would think that we would reach our hand over the other side of the line. You know, if we were damaging their stocks that were at critically low rates, I'm sure they would be putting pressure on us to limit fisheries if we could even more. So I guess I didn't get a clear question in there, but I would just hope that we're emphasizing, you know, the amount of exploitation that's happening to such a dangerous fish stock for us. My other question, and I'll wrap this up here. So the lower abundance thresholds that are going to be used for the lower abundance threshold goals that are going to be used for this year's NOF, how do those match up versus the 10-year plan lower abundance thresholds?
So the management objectives that we're using for Chinook for this year that the co-managers have agreed to and proposed to NOAA are the same objectives that are in the 10-year plan.
Okay, so we're using this year's North of Falcon. We're using the 10-year management plan as the same model for what we're setting our seasons as for this year.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I saw his hand up for a minute. I don't know if he wants to say anything. One of our partners from NOAA Fisheries was here on the line. James, did you want to say anything? Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me, Mark?
We can.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, my camera feed is giving me trouble this morning. But yeah, I just, I guess I was interested to speak in since there were several questions in a row on the still Squamish in particular, but with regard to the Canadian West Coast Vancouver Island fishery. So, and I'm happy to speak with the folks if they have follow-up questions as well. But in general, as Mark indicated, there was a new Chinook annex that started officially in 2019. It was actually the management framework used in 2018 as well. And that secured agreement on additional reductions over the prior 10-year agreement. But ever since the 1999 agreement for Chinook, there's been 2 categories of fisheries managed for. And I don't want to get into a bunch of jargon, but that implemented a series of fisheries management that focused on stock specific objectives as opposed to all being managed for aggregate abundance. And the US proposed and included several of the index stocks in the southern states, some of which are in Puget Sound. And so still Squamish is currently one of those index stocks and has a specific management objective for both US and Canadian fisheries to adhere to. And in this most recent version, for most of the individual stocks, the US secured an additional 12.5% reduction over the prior 10-year. So when combined with the last successive renegotiations, there's been agreement on a substantial reduction of stock impacts from both the Canadian fisheries and the southern US fisheries that affect some of those Canadian stocks. The other thing I just like to mention to folks is when you're looking at the information that's available on exploitation rates and where that exploitation takes place, and you see the histograms that show the proportions taken in which fisheries, and undoubtedly when you're talking about stocks like Stiligwamish, you see a higher proportion of the total exploitation rate taken in the fisheries. It's important to remember that that's the proportion of the exploited portion of the population. So yes, very, if 55% of the exploitation happens in those fisheries, but the total exploitation is, I don't have the numbers offhand, but roughly 35%. It's 55% of that. So I just want to, some people get a little confused and think that half of the total fish that come out of the one of these rivers are taken, and that very, very well used to be the case, and in some cases outside of Puget Sound that may still be the case, but it's important to sort of anchor the proportion in which fishery to the total. So anyways, thanks.
Thank you, James. Really appreciate those words. I think you brought a lot of clarity to the conversation. Appreciate that.
And I had a couple questions in the chat asking me to clarify raising your hand. So at the bottom of your screen, there is a reactions tab. It's a little smiley face with a plus sign. You may need to click that to see the raise hand. If you have an older version of Zoom, it will just say raise hand at the bottom. Or also if you're on a cell phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And it looks like Christian has his hand up. I have unmuted you.
Hey, how's it going? Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can, Christian.
All right, thank you. Hi, I was just wondering, with the Coho forecast doing so well this year, last year there were a couple of rivers that had good forecasts, but it ended up pretty much being everywhere had an amazing run. From what I experienced, most people experienced in the freshwater on the peninsula, on the straits and coast side. What are you attributing that run to? And I guess the adjustments you might have made, is that why the run looks so good this year? Or I know the ocean temperatures, I guess, are dropping, which maybe that's why the runs are getting better, but I don't understand how that would affect the fish coming in next year or this year. But yeah, what are you guys attributing these Coho runs to? So
thanks for that question, Christian. I guess where I would start is I would encourage you to go to our website and take a look at the forecast meeting materials that we had there. There was a great presentation, and there's even a video up if you're interested there too. There was a great presentation by Dr. Marisa Litz from our department going over the different factors that affect marine survival in the ocean. I think in general, these better Coho returns can be attributed to better ocean conditions, both when these young juveniles enter the ocean. It's a really important time for them, and I think we've seen those better conditions equate to better survival.
So you're saying 2 years ago the ocean conditions were better?
They've been starting to improve over the last couple of years.
I've just noticed that it was in December of 2021 is what I was reading. But, okay, so that's what you guys are. I mean, that was just a simple question: is what were you attributing to? I don't necessarily need to go watch the presentation. I will definitely though, but yeah. So ocean conditions is what you're attributing this to.
Well, I there's always it's a complex web of things that go into the amount of fish that are determined to come back. It all starts in the freshwater and is basically through the ocean conditions. So, I mean, I would say, Christian, if we're looking at the big picture, it's a combination of good freshwater conditions when these fish went out, and then good ocean conditions when they got out there. Always that all those things in combination help with the survival and the return.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And our next question is from Fred. Fred, I have unmuted you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Mark, I was just wondering on your bullet points there where you had chum stocks in Hoods Canal and Seattle returns similar to last year. Are you returning, is that paper fish, or is that what actually did return? Like, for example, in Seattle, is it what when you say similar to last year, what numbers are you going by?
Well, I think we're going on preseason forecasts, right? So if we're looking at preseason forecasts from last year to preseason forecasts this year, the amount of expectation to Hood Canal is actually down from last year. And then South Sound is up a little, but pretty similar to what we've seen in the recent past.
So what we saw in the recent past in like Seattle was, a run of over 500,000. Is that what we're looking at, or is that what we're going by? Is that what you're talking about here? Or are you talking about past paper fish from last year that didn't happen?
So I'm not sure where you're going with your paper fish. We have forecasts each year that we use to try to figure out what's coming back. And in reference to chum, and this, Fred, we have in-season test fisheries that happen that feed into our in-season update models that help us determine what if we have available fish to fish on in any given year. So I think what I'm saying about this year is that the expectations for South Sound chum in comparison to last year's preseason forecasts are very similar.
So you're going off 2021's predictions, not actually 2021's actual run. Is that what I'm getting from you?
So again, the returns don't necessarily equate to a better expected forecast in the following year. There's no correlation there from one to the next, as far as I know. And if Dr. Aga's on the line, who's our chumping sockeye specialist, he may be able to speak better to the forecasts. I saw Quasi turned his camera on. Quasi, if you want to try to go ahead and answer to equate what I'm struggling with Fred.
Sure. I was just going to actually say in our commercial breakout, which will be happening here pretty shortly, we'll be actually looking at some 3-year averages of forecast and runs, comparing them to what our 2022 forecast and how well the fleets did in 2021. So we'll be kind of doing a mid-level dive into this stuff. And Fred, maybe that would get at some of the questions you're asking here.
Oh, you cut out a little bit there for me. But
I think what Quasi was saying, Fred, is that the commercial folks have some of a bunch of information teed up for you guys to talk about in relation to your specific question for the commercial breakout meeting right after this.
All right, thanks. One more thing. Do you guys have an ad hoc commercial meeting scheduled, or is that something that's still in the works? Or I didn't see it on your schedule there.
I think that was going to be discussed in the breakout meeting too, about planning for that next get together with the commercial folks.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
And it looks like Shannon has his hand up. Shannon, I have unmuted you.
Yeah, thanks. So I was looking at the forecast. This is kind of a follow-up to Fred's discussion with the department. So on the Snohomish and the Stillaguamish, they use fry-based methods, and the field guys in the old days used to do near shore sampling, and I think all those guys are gone now. I remember them telling me about how they sampled for chump fry. But maybe to help Fred out a little bit here, if you look at the forecast method, it says ocean indicator regression. So it seems to me that that they're relying on the ocean, the healthier conditions of the ocean to predict this run. So I guess that's all they're going with. So I don't know if that helps Fred or whether it helps anybody, but I guess it's a little better than throwing a dart at the board. Thank you.
So with that, I don't see any other hands raised. With that, I think we're going to go into our recreational, commercial, and coastal breakouts. When you registered for the meeting, you should have chosen what breakout room you preferred to be in. If that didn't happen, Leah's going to just hang on the line, and Leah will make sure that you get into whatever room you desire to be in for a discussion. So with that, just really appreciate everybody's time and being here today, and we'll continue the discussion in the breakout, and we look forward to seeing you at our next engagement. Thanks.
Okay, so everybody that registered before about 8:30 this morning will immediately go into breakout rooms, and I will open them now.
Thank you, Leah.
Okay, and if you are not in a breakout room, if you could raise your hand or put it in the chat where you would like to be, I can assign you to the breakout room. And Kelly, Suzanne, what breakout room would you like to be in? Rec?
Puget Sound Rec, please.
And Carl Davis, you asked to be in Puget Sound. Is that rec or commercial? Rec, I assume?
Yeah, rec, please.
Doug St. Denis, are you wanting in Puget Sound recreational or coast?
Did you get that?
No, let me see. Did you put it in the chat?
Puget Sound rec.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
Leah, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Hey, this is Bob Kehoe, and I think I should be in the commercial group.
Yes, you should. Are you in a different group?
I'm in the recreational one right now.
Okay, I will move you right now.
Okay.
Norm, I see you have your hand up. You want to be in Puget Sound Rec, right?
That's correct.
And Troy, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to be in Puget Sound Rec also? Lisa, I see you have unmuted. Which room would you like to go into?
The coastal, please.
Alex Van Hine, which room would you like to go into?
Puget Sound Rec, please.
Austin Reams, which room would you like to go into?
Coastal commercial, please.
Andy Walgmont, which room would you like to go into? Mark Wahlberg, which room would you like to be placed into?
Commercial, please.
Miss you around here.
It's getting a little funky on this side, so miss you too.
And Justin Wong, which room would you like to go into?
Puget Sound Rec, please.
And Julie Clocklin.
Hey, Leah, could you put me into Puget Sound Rec, please?
Me there now. Mike Grunheit.
Commercial, please.
Joe Holtkamp.
Puget Sound Rec, please.
Mark Shinman.
Puget Sound Rec, please.
Dane Woldseth.
Puget Sound Rec.
Ben, did you get stuck in the wrong room?
Yeah, I ended up in commercial, but if you want to, Aaron's in coast, so if you want to send me to Puget Sound Rec, I can record there.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. And Jim Scott, are you wanting to be in rec?
Yes, please.
David Bain.
Coast.
Ed Keller. Josh Weinheimer.
Puget Sound Rec, please.
Kyle Toll. You want to be in rec, right?
Puget Sound Rec, yeah, thank you.
Marcus Yuasa.
Puget Sound Rec.
Mike Gilchrist. Do you want to be in Puget Sound Rec, right?
Correct.
Ron Garner.
Puget Sound.
Susan Kramer.
Puget Sound Rec, please.
Ed Keller. Tom McBride.
Coast, please.
Val.
Coast, please.
And phone number ending in 594. Is there anybody left that needs to be put in a room?
Ryan Johnson to the coast, please. Hello.
Sheila, where would you like to be?
Puget Sound commercial, please.
Sorry, did I put you in rec?
Yep.
Is there anybody else sitting out in nowhere that needs to be put in a room?